I'm a professor and director of the Reading and Literacy program at the University of Utah. When I look back on my career and I think, what are the most important hallmarks? What is it that I remember most? I have to go back to my undergraduate days. And I was at the University of Massachusetts at Boston, and actually I was a psychology major. And for some reason, I decided to get a teaching license as well. And I did get that license. And then when I graduated, I had two jobs. I had a job in like a corporation, and this was doing work using my psychology degree for advertising, okay? And then the other job is I got a teaching job as well. And so that was sort of the first fork in the road for me. And I thought to myself, do I really want to be selling toothpaste, or would I rather work with kids, and would I rather work with children? And I made a decision right then, and probably it was the most important decision of my life, because I decided I wanted to teach. I really wanted to do something of value rather than selling toothpaste. I thought that wasn't a good way to go. So that's how I ended up in education, sort of serendipitously. I taught for several years, and I loved teaching. I absolutely loved working with kids. And then I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. And I wasn't really sure why I wanted to go to graduate school. I thought it would be fun to work with student teachers, but I really didn't know anything beyond that. The superintendent of schools where I worked used to come into our teacher's lounge. Great superintendent. She was wonderful. So she would come into our teacher's lounge and she would talk to us. And one day she said to me, I told her about my dilemma. I didn't know what to go to graduate school in. And so she said to me, she said, I think you have a really good career ahead of you in education. I think you should stay in education. And that really meant a lot to me, and that was another fork in the road. And so I decided to go to graduate school in education. I drove into the University of Colorado at Boulder, and it was in August, and I was so excited about going to graduate school, and I went into the College of Education, and nobody was there. Okay, because they were all on vacation. So the only person who was there was a reading professor. And that's how I ended up in reading. I had an opportunity to work at the Center for the Study of Reading at the University of Illinois. And when I look at it now, the Center for the Study of Reading is not really well known. I think if you ask most people, they don't know what it is. But at the time, in the 1980s, it was the major place to be in the reading field. And that's where major research was being done. It was a federally funded program, a federally funded project that was multidisciplinary. And by that I mean there were linguists there were anthropologists, sociologists, educators, practitioners, and educational researchers all coming together to look at children and their comprehension and to help them learn to comprehend better. And that was a huge event in my life. I worked with David Pearson and Isabel Beck, Jean Osborne. Those are the three people that I worked with mostly, and they had major influences on my thinking and on my own growth as a professional. I was there a few years, and then I went to Michigan State University, and then from there to the University of Utah. And there I remain now. And I think those were the main events. The only other event that I can think of since I've been to the University of Utah, and that's been a long time, is that before that time, and up to, I would say, the year 1995 or so, I really focused on doing my research on, say, middle-class children, upper-middle-class children in schools. And in part, it was easy to get into those schools at that time. And so it was easy to do the kind of research that I do, which is instructional research. It was easy to get schools to accommodate me and help me. And so I would say that I worked with that kind of population up until the mid-1990s. And it was at that point that I thought, you know what, I don't believe that that I can do as much good with those kids as I could with low-income kids. And I thought about it and I thought, you know, that's really where I want to focus my time. I only have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of expertise, and I want to focus on the kids who probably need it the most. And that was a major switch for me in terms of the kind of research, or who I did the research with. I have always done research in classrooms, but I changed. And so I decided to work with low-income children who probably need the most help. And so I would say those are probably the major turning points and events in my career that I can think of that really made a difference and made an impact on me. When I think of the work that I've done at the University of Utah, and that's been about 28 years, I've worked with wonderful people. I've had the opportunity to work with Ray Reitzel, and we met again serendipitously. He was at Brigham Young University. I was at the University of Utah. We had a project together that someone put us together with, and we didn't even know each other. And that ended up with a 25-year wonderful collaboration that I had with Ray Reitzel. In addition, another couple that was really quite impactful in my life was Michelle and John Hosp. Michelle and John were special education teachers at the University of Utah, but with a real interest in reading. And that was a wonderful collaboration because it gave me the opportunity to see reading from a special education perspective. And that was really helpful for me because I'd always seen reading more from a developmental perspective coming from my own background as a classroom teacher. And so John and Michelle were really quite influential for me. And also we worked together on the Reading First project. And that was a project that we worked with Title I schools, Title I primary grade classrooms. And they gave me an opportunity to understand or to look at reading from a different angle, again, with our neediest kids. And so that was very influential to me as well. Most recently, I've worked with Doug Hacker, and Doug is a writing person. And again, I want to note that he's in writing, not in reading. And that's been a wonderful collaboration for me too, because it has helped me see a different perspective or a different angle, let's say, on reading from that writing perspective. So really at the University of Utah, I've had the opportunity to work with many wonderful people who have really helped me grow professionally and see a broader perspective of reading, let's say. When I think of my own major contributions to the field, in all honesty, the thing that I hope most is that I've made a contribution to children. I hope through the work that I've done that I have helped teachers understand the reading process better, understand kids better, and teach them better. If I have done that and nothing more, then I will be very happy. But probably there are publications that I think may have helped move the field a little bit. I think the piece that I did with David Pearson and Laura Roller and Jerry Duffy that we published in 1991 in the Review of Educational Research probably was quite influential in the field. And at that time, what we did was we sort of highlighted the importance of comprehension strategies as a different way of looking at reading comprehension. And I have to say that prior to that, what I always understood when I taught was that comprehension consisted of a set of skills. And you have kids practice these skills until they get very good at them. The whole idea of teaching a small set of strategies rather than 43 or 45 skills was really, even at that time, something that was fairly new in the field. Now it seems like everybody knows strategies, and that's come with its own set of problems now. But at the time, it really was a very new idea. Michael Presley, of course, was very well known for his work in that area and wonderful studies that he did and reviews of studies. But that piece in 1991 in the Review of Ed Research, I think really helped a lot of people think differently about comprehension instruction. The other contribution that I think that I've made it relates to Reading First. The Reading First project was a really good project, and I am absolutely convinced that it helped many, many children from high poverty schools from high poverty homes read better. And it's controversial, and there are people who think it didn't help at all, but coming from a place where I saw the work of teachers and children learning in ways they hadn't learned before, I think that was a major contribution. With John and Michelle Hosp and Kristen Nelson, we published a piece in the Journal of Literacy Research on the results of Reading First, where we found in the state of Utah that we really did make a difference in children's lives. And for me, I think it was a very important piece, not only because it was a research piece, but more important because of the individual observations that I made and watched teachers change the way they think, change the way they teach. I saw huge differences in teachers. And perhaps Reading First was not a national success, but in many, many schools, in many parts of the country, it was a success. So I have to look at that as a major contribution that I think that I've helped contribute to as well. I've been at the University of Utah for 28 years, and in all those years, I've worked with districts, with schools, with administrators, with teachers, with children. And in that community, I sort of immersed myself, really, when I got there, because part of my work as a professional and as an educational researcher is to be among children and among teachers. That's very important to me. I don't stay at the university and publish and write. I get out in schools and dig deep inside of classrooms to look at what are teachers doing, what are kids doing, how are kids learning, how are they understanding something. And so doing that in the state has really been very important to me. I was very active at the Utah State Office of Education, and I did that in the late 1990s, and that gave me a sense of what the state was like. I remember when I first began to work there, I think one of my supervisor said, okay, so what are you going to do for the state? And I remember sitting there and looking and thinking, okay, so you have this blank slate. What are you going to do? You've got all these kids, they're scoring in varied ways, of course, but you also have Title I schools, you have schools that have high concentrations of Hispanic children, English language learners, for example. And okay, so what are you going to do? How are you going to make things better? And that was a challenge for me, and it was a real wake-up call too, because that's very different from doing educational research, where your grain is so very small, and you look at a small population or a small sample of children, and you say, all right, what am I going to do for these kids? It's really quite different to look at the state level and say, okay, what are you going to do in the state? And so my work at the state has been extensive. I have always been involved. For the 25 years that I've worked there, I've been involved with the state office, but also individual districts as well. I worked as a coach. I worked as a supervisor. I worked alongside of teachers in classrooms. And to the extent that I've improved things there, then I feel really good about that. I don't know, I think it's hard to make a huge contribution. I hope I've made a small contribution, and I'm happy with that. As part of my work with the state of Utah, I've worked as vice president and then president of the Utah International Reading Association, now International Literacy Association. And that has been a valuable experience in trying to help the organization and the teachers in the organization understand the importance of research and how that applies to practice. I think that part of, I would say, a problem with prior years for the International Reading Association in Utah has been a lack of an really understanding of the research and its contributions and its potential contributions to classroom teachers. And so I'm hoping that part of my own contribution has been to help teachers understand that and to help members of the organization understand that as well. As part of working at the State Office of Education and at the university as well, I would say I've met wonderful students, absolutely wonderful students who are interested in and curious about learning, curious about research, and wanting to understand research better and to contribute in that way. And so I would say that another important contribution I hope to have made would be to mentor students. So mentoring students is an important part of my work, especially in my later years. And I think that there are many students who have worked with me who have now gone out and done really good things in terms of helping students learn better and make a contribution themselves. The biggest area that I see where we have lots of questions and no answers is the whole issue of academic language. I think that academic language is one of the most important areas that we have not looked at, that we have to look at in order to understand comprehension better. I think that's so important, and we can't do it without the help of linguists. Educational researchers and reading researchers cannot do it on their own. And so I really look forward to linguists collaborating with educational and reading researchers to help answer the questions like, what is it about academic language that makes it so difficult for kids to comprehend? This is especially true for our English language learners. I think we've just begun to start thinking about academic language. We don't know very much about it. There's not much research on it. And there is almost no research at all in classrooms to answer some questions about, okay, so what do you do? What does a teacher do to help students understand academic language better? It really, in some sense, it relates to the whole issue of oral language, which is something that I think all of us researchers understand the importance of, but there's very little research on it. We talk about reading, writing, listening, and speaking, but when we talk about that oral language part of those four areas, we don't know much about it. And instructionally, we know very little. We know it's important, but we really don't know how to make things better, how to teach it. And I think there may be some programs out there. I don't think they're very well known or very popular. So I think that if I were to mention one thing in my mind that I think will contribute to comprehension and our understanding of comprehension and instruction better, it will be a better understanding of academic language. Now, another area that I see that's really that's intriguing to me is the whole issue of many of the standards that are in the Common Core state standards as they exist right now. And we don't know what the future of the Common Core state standards are, but as I looked to the standards, I saw many areas that we have no research on. We certainly have a research on why we have the standards, but we don't have research on the effectiveness of individual standards. And I see that as really critical. Now, related to that is the academic standards as related to our struggling readers. I love the idea of the high bar that the Common Core sets for us all. When I saw the Common Core state standards myself, I was quite surprised in many ways, and pleasantly surprised. I thought, yeah, we really haven't thought about these higher order comprehension skills. We've mostly been focused with the lower comprehension skills. So the idea that there are higher level skills we really need to think about and really need to study, I think is critical. And specifically how we help struggling readers get up there, I'm really quite interested in. I had a conversation with a cab driver on my way to this interview, and he happened to be a teacher. Actually, he was an Uber driver, and it was summer, and so he was driving a cab. And he happened to be a teacher, and he was talking about the standards and how difficult it was for his English language learners to accomplish the standards. And so he was saying he kind of wished that we had not had the standards and we went back to the old state standards that we had used at one time many years ago. And I didn't say anything to him, but I thought, no, we really do have to keep the standards. We need that high bar. It really does help kids. And when we hold them to a higher bar, they really do accomplish more. But our struggle is, how do we help our kids, our high poverty kids, our kids who can't quite, our struggling readers who can't quite get there? How do we help them to achieve the standards as well? So those are areas that I see as very, very important. And then I'll mention one other area, and that is professional development. I'm rather dismayed to see recent studies of the effectiveness of professional development that kind of demonstrate that despite our best efforts, professional development is not that effective. And everybody knows about the one-shot workshop, which is not effective, and I think we've known that for maybe 20 some odd years, maybe longer. Most teachers can tell you that through their own experiences. But even longer, more extended professional development doesn't seem to be effective, and that to me is a critical issue which we're going to have to face. We have limited and mixed research on the effectiveness of coaching. I think there's a lot of potential there, but I think there's a lot of work to be done as well. So that is an area that I think is in high need of help, not only in literacy, but in all subject areas. And because of my focus on classrooms and teachers in particular, that's an area that I think really needs to be looked at much more carefully and thought through much more carefully as well. Over the last 20 years or so, we really have understood that the importance of strategies and the importance of being a strategic reader. And most of us as good adult readers are strategic, in fact. The problem is, I think, that because teachers don't have a complete or a deep understanding of the comprehension process, comprehension strategies have become the sort of catch-all that skills had become at one time. So I'm afraid that many teachers now think that comprehension consists of teaching a group of strategies, kind of like we used to teach a group of skills. The Common Core, I think, the Common Core state standards did a nice job of focusing on the importance of prior knowledge. And I think we've got to come to some better understanding of prior knowledge and its importance, and that balance between helping students develop knowledge and helping them learn strategies as well. So I think for teachers teaching students to read, it's some combination of helping students build knowledge as well as teaching them a group of strategies. It bothers me that the field tends to move from one to another. So it is the sort of pendulum that we've talked about for so many years. Either all you do is teach strategies or all you do is focus on knowledge. And it's not either or, it's both. And I think that's really important. I haven't seen a lot of good studies that I would say, or really many studies at all, that have tried to do both. And I think that's difficult because of the type of educational research we do. Maybe we need to change the kind of educational research we do in classrooms anyway, to look at more long-term growth of programs, for example, that do combine strategies and prior knowledge. It's clear that one or the other by itself doesn't work. It seems like, to me, like we have a good enough theory of comprehension, and I think of Kinch's construction integration model, we have a good enough model to use to then to go and construct really good curriculum and good instruction that then can be used by teachers. But I do think that teachers need an understanding of the comprehension process before that's going to happen. I think it's very difficult for teachers to understand comprehension in ways that they do understand phonemic awareness, for example, or phonics. And I have to go and I think about some teachers that I worked with several years ago. And it was working at the primary grades. These teachers learned phonics and phonemic awareness really well and got their kids' scores up amazingly. They did great things. But then when it came to comprehension, they honestly didn't know what to do. And they would tell me, I really don't know what to do. And I would talk to them about some things that they could do. And they would do those things, but you could get a sense, and they even said they didn't really understand it. So I do think that in order to be able to have teachers work well with comprehension and combine those strategies, they have to understand the process. I don't think there's any way to get around it. It's complex, it's not easy, it's complicated, and there aren't easy answers. I think that you can teach a teacher to teach phonemic awareness much more easily than you can teach them to teach comprehension. So I do think that combination of prior knowledge and strategies can go a long way to help. The other thing that I would include in that as well, though, is vocabulary. And I don't want to forget vocabulary because it's a critical part of that comprehension piece. So I think some combination of those really needs to be the focus of instruction in ways that will help kids comprehend probably and do a better job than we're doing right now. Really, I faced a lot of challenges growing up and being where I am and trying to get where I am, let's say. As I said, none of my family even had a college education. My mom and dad had 7th and 8th grade educations. And not only that, but they also didn't value education. And I have to attribute part of my own progress came from living in the Boston area. There are lots of colleges in Boston, and there's so many that it's almost like part of you graduate from high school and you go to college. It really is an expectation. And I often think, if I had lived in a suburb, not a suburb, but in a rural part of Nebraska, would I be where I am today? And I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think not having models like many people do, the context of living in Boston was very important to me. Nevertheless, even with that, I still had challenges because I really didn't have any mentor or any model to say, I want to be like so-and-so. When I, graduated from college and I thought about graduate school, as I've said before, I didn't know what graduate school was. The piece of paper that means the most to me in my whole life was a letter of acceptance when I got my PhD. Not to graduate, but the letter of acceptance into the PhD program. That is the most meaningful document that I have. It's even more important than my PhD that I got. And the reason for that is because I came to understand what a PhD was, what it meant, and it became important to me that I achieve it. And so receiving admission into the program was saying, yeah, you can do this. And you have to realize that I didn't have anyone in my life prior to that time who said, you can do this. Number one, I had to learn what this was. And then number two, I had to hear someone say, yes, you can do this. And that's what happened at the University of Colorado. There were people there who were confident of me and who said to me, yes, you can do this. Nevertheless, because I didn't have advisors or mentors who knew the field very well or could network me very well, it was really difficult to network myself, which I had to do. And that's why the Center for the Study of Reading was so important to me, because it did give me the networking that I just didn't have. And while I had one or two very small pieces of work that were published after I graduated from the university, I didn't have major pieces of research. And so it was the Center for the Study of Reading that gave me the impetus to do that kind of research that I knew would be successful in the field and would make a contribution, which is what I wanted to do. So I would say that there are a lot of challenges. I can't lie and say that it was easy. It wasn't easy at all. And in many aspects, I had to bootstrap myself up. But it's something that I did, and I'm proud that I did, and that I think probably gave me tough skin. Now, saying that, I wouldn't recommend my method for graduate students looking to become educational researchers in the field. I would say if that's something that you're interested in, the first thing that you should do is always have your eyes on the prize. And the prize is not to have the most publications. The prize is not to receive the most awards. The prize is that you make a difference in the lives of children. That's the prize. And I think it's really important for students who are working on their master's degree or their doctoral degrees and wanting to become an educational researcher that ultimately that's got to be the prize. Now, for me, of course, I do that through instruction and through teachers. All educational researchers obviously don't have to do that. Even if it's like Kinch, and if you're developing a model of reading, it doesn't matter. Your eyes always have to be on making a difference in the lives of children. And if you're not doing that, if you're doing it for your ego, or if you're doing it to get the most publications, I guess it's okay, but that's not really what we need in the field. What the field needs are people who really are focused on the end result, not politics, not being the most popular, not winning awards, but really on making a difference in this world, which is not that easy to do.